What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another unknown episode of the Book Binge where I'm reviewing a book and have no clue when it's releasing, so I don't know what episode it is, but you probably saw the title and or description by now, so you know, even though currently recording it, I don't. This week, we're reviewing something that I didn't anticipate that I would ever actually do a review video on, but decided I kind of wanted to, and because I needed to fill out a gap somewhere at some point with this, and because I think it's a hot topic. I think I'm probably going to release this sometime around a relevant date. This is the first volume of The Wandering Inn by pirateaba. So this is a web novel and a lit RPG book. I never thought, like I said, that I would dedicate a review to this, but here goes. I did this on audio when I listened to it in, I believe it was like August through September of 2022, somewhere in that time period, because there's no way that I'm just going to dedicatedly read something online when I or try to acquire it physically. Like, I'm definitely not going to do that, and I wasn't going to read something online. Firstly, because I don't really like reading stuff online or electronically in general, but also because I have plenty of other stuff that I need to read with my eyeballs anyway. So I figured that if there was going to be a time that I was going to read this, and it had come as a random recommendation from some people to listen to it, I was like, sure, I guess I'll just listen to it because I don't really do audio. So if I have something to do audio that isn't something that I'm going to read at any other point, it might as well be this. So that was more or less the decision behind my reading it. It mostly worked for me, as it turns out, as you'll see momentarily through the course of this review, but let's talk about the good of The Wandering Inn, because there is plenty of good. I don't think that people who treat this as just a cringe idea, that lit RPG is a cringe idea, I don't think you're giving this particular web novel a fair enough shake. And part of this is because the lit RPG elements actually aren't really that ingrained into the story. They're part of the world building and what some characters and stuff discuss, but it's not the point. It is far from the point. What is the point of The Wandering Inn? Well, for me, it seems like it's the slice of life, at least within this first volume. It is fantastic here. The book is about 347,000 words. It feels like it could be like 120 or 150, even though it is a 44-hour audiobook on one-time speed. It doesn't feel like it takes that long, and sure, you kind of feel the time go by. It took me a couple months to get through it, but it didn't feel like it was lasting that long. It didn't feel like it was wearing out its welcome. I'll talk about some of the problems that I had with the book, but generally speaking, it overall worked for me. There's relatively, admittedly, little in the way of major events occurring throughout, but when they do happen, they are pretty eventful, and everything is so enjoyable to experience anyway that I didn't really have a problem with it. The day-to-day is incredibly real and fun within the book, which is why I can overlook the occasional annoyances. Again, a little bit more on that later. The world building is surprisingly intriguing and good as well, so all this just kind of works. The day-to-day of the life within this world and good world building just makes it fun to be listening to the story. The cultures, the way different races interact and are built within the story is actually surprisingly in depth for, it's like, how do you come up with this stuff off the top of your head? Like, how does that even work? And who knows, maybe the author was planning something like this long before she started writing it, but it feels very organic, and I really liked the way that it was expanded. The hints at how the world within the story might interact with the real world, because that's part of the premise, is also pretty cool. Like, I'm surprised that I like it as much. It seems like it has a little bit of a Portal fantasy aspect to it, but I think a lot of that might not come real uh into real familiarity until maybe in the second volume, or maybe even later than that. Who knows? Either way, I enjoyed all of that, and the cast of side characters, especially, this is one of the best parts of The Wandering Inn. The cast of side characters is fantastic. There's so much personality in the story and the characters, and this is particularly thanks to the audio. All of the characters are very distinct sounding, despite there being a surprisingly large amount of them in some regards. And both of the storylines that the book follows, for the most part, have so many memorable characters. It's insane. Like, I can still recall so many of them and so many events from the book, even though it's been well over a year, and typically I struggle to remember stuff after a year or more. Another great thing about the book is the climax. It is something had me jaw dropped. Like, some of the decisions that this author made in some of the last chapters are like, I cannot believe you just did that. I cannot believe you just made that decision. Like, that doesn't make any sense for someone writing a safe story that is mostly slice of life to do for a climax, but it is really cool. And reviewing this, talking about the things that I liked about the story actually make me want to go back to volume 2 right now, but thinking about it, I think I'm probably just going to wait for the audio for the rewrite of volume 1 to come out. I want to do that first, and then maybe I'll go into volume 2 after that, because that would probably be a good idea. There's clearly a reason she's rewriting the volume, so maybe I ought to do it. Either way, that is a lot of stuff, and I just really enjoyed a lot of what happened in The Wandering Inn, a lot of my experience with the story. But even so, let's talk about some of the bad, because I don't think volume 1 of The Wandering Inn, at least, is perfect, and there were a couple moments that did really bug me. I did only rate it 4 stars after all, and part of the reason I rated it 4 stars, and I debated rating it 5 stars for a minute because of the climax, but ultimately it is a 4-star story, so obviously there's some stuff that maybe holds it back a little bit. And what are those things? Well, the most major problem that I had with The Wandering Inn is that there are a couple characters that can be actually really annoying at times. Aaron, as essentially the main character of the story, is the prime example. It somewhat frequently had me eye-rolling, and had some really cringe moments throughout the story. The early chapters are the real problem in this regard, where Aaron is really the only character on the page. Once new cast members, once the side characters are introduced, this problem is reduced dramatically, like hugely dramatically, and the audio admittedly exacerbated the problem in the first place, because Aaron's narration is probably the worst performance of any of the characters in the story. Like, it is actually, why is she annoying? Like, why is her voice just annoying? I don't know why, but she is a little bit annoying to deal with. Once you get used to it, it's not bad, but she does still continue to have her moments. The worst of this problem that I had was especially in chapter 50, and I specifically remember chapter 50 because, well, again, it's in the audiobook on Audible. It's more on that in a bit, but I was so annoyed with Aaron in this one particular chapter that I almost DNF'd the story. That's how annoying and it wasn't just how annoying, like she was speaking or whatever, just being really stupid. Characters being annoyingly stupid. Sometimes this is a problem. Like I said, chapter 50 was bad, and also shortly thereafter, it might have been chapter 51, the other main POV character, Ryoka, has a moment of similarly aggravating behavior, even though throughout the rest of the story, she's never really that aggravating at all. In fact, I prefer her POV over Aaron's, generally speaking. But some of this is simply just characters being annoying. Although I will go ahead and mention that the problem with Ryoka being annoying in the one chapter is mostly only annoying because she's generally the more bearable of the two characters, like I mentioned, and the fact that she actually looks back on it after the fact with disgust. Like, I should not have been behaving that way. That is actually terrible. And so it makes that part of her character somewhat, more real. Whereas Aaron never really self-reflects, even when she is being an absolute douche. Either way, the side characters, even when the main character is being a little bit annoying, the side characters in the chapters are so good that it makes it bearable. Just on its own, the side cast is amazing, and like I said, the audio performance for it is fantastic. Chapters is the other main primary thing that is, could be considered bad about The Wandering Inn. If you're reading online, I don't even know what pirateaba's chapter naming conventions are. Like, why? I just don't understand them. They don't make any sense. It's really stupid. Whereas the audiobook, chapters make sense. Like, it actually does chapter 1 and chapter 2 and chapter 3, maybe has an interlude there randomly. But so matching up what's happening between the audiobook chapters versus what's online, you have to use what is actually on the Wandering Inn website to actually convert all that stuff and understand what is when and where and stuff to line things up, because yeah, it's actually kind of bad. It's actually really bad. Like, why do you name chapters this way online? I genuinely just don't understand it. Maybe it's a web novel thing, but I don't understand it either way. Next up, the final point that I'll talk about in the bad is the idea of the lit RPG, which I kind of mentioned a little bit earlier. Honestly, I had no issues with this, but some people, for whatever reason, are just completely against the idea of lit RPG, like, at all. For, frankly, no other reason than because lit RPG. I don't understand why, but if you're like that, then maybe don't check this out, even though the lit RPG isn't really that big of a deal within the story, especially not up to this point. So, you know, that might be your turnoff if you really aren't with that idea. But if you don't really care one way or the other about the idea of lit RPG, it's not really that serious in the story, so I don't totally see it as a problem. It's just an additional element to the world building that makes an aspect to it fun from the perspective of the character work. There's interactions between Aaron as the main character and even Ryoga as the other POV character and some of the other people in the world that makes this aspect a little bit interesting. Plus, it takes such a small focus in the story itself, as I've mentioned multiple times. It's supplementary, basically at most, that it's never overbearing. And the fact that it isn't overbearing means that I don't consider it a bad, but people who are actively opposed to lit RPG as an idea are not going to enjoy this if they're that opposed to it. The ugly, I kind of mentioned the author is currently rewriting this first volume. At least at the time that I made these notes, she was still rewriting it, I think, to be a little bit more consistent in quality with the rest, and maybe to edit, add, remove maybe some minor stuff to better foreshadow things or better line up with the story as it is, whatever. Either way, it could very well be the case that the things that bothered me are no longer accurate if you read the rewritten version, which is actually part of why I want to re-listen to it when the rewrite releases on audio, because I want to see what's changed or what of the prose is updated or what things are a little bit different with the rewrite versus, you know, this first time around. In terms of the recommendation, I think that if you love slice of life, or if you have any random curiosity for the story, absolutely try it. I'll get through future volumes before I decide whether I full-on recommend the story as a whole, although the climax of this book is incredible. But generally speaking, if you want to give it a try, if you're not inherently interested, I won't urge you to do so based on my experience so far. But the main point is, if you're interested in it, I don't think the first volume is necessarily too much of a sacrifice. It's the size of a single Wheel of Time book, so like you can get through the one, and I think it's a self-contained enough story arc within itself that's just like, okay, it's a very good, you know, it's okay for deciding whether you want to continue or not. Because once I finished, I decided like, yeah, I want to continue. It's not going to be immediately, but I'm interested enough to continue. And if you read this first volume and you're kind of mixed on it, or you don't really feel like continuing, maybe up to this point, at least after only reading one volume, for me, I would say that's fine. It's just worth giving a shot, I would say. Thank you for watching the video, though. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed my discussion on this web novel, and we'll see when I continue the story. I'll probably do another review of The Wandering in Volume 1, actually, with the rewrite. It might just be a really short one that says, like, if you want to know all my general points, go watch this video, and then I'll tell you, like, maybe some of the differences based off the update, but who knows? We'll see when this video comes out, and when that comes out, and what I'm doing at the time. So thank you guys for watching. I have no clue what video is coming next, because I don't know what episode of the Book Binge this even is. I'll see you guys in the next video.